Hey everyone, my name is Karel, and in our last video we explored the hows and whys of how you actually go about and make a good maze. Today we're actually going to build one. Now, there's a couple considerations here. A good maze isn't going to fit in normal difficulty easily. You're either going to end up with low trap density or few side passages, and or relatively non-lethal trap combos, and since you're basically going to have to build it on a medium or small plot in order to keep the path length down and maintain good trap density, you're extremely limited on capacity for future expansion should you decide to go up a difficulty tier in the future. Therefore, I'm going to start out by targeting the dangerous difficulty, with the intent to leave myself some room for expansion in the future. Since crossing trap arcs, hollow cubes, which do generate a high danger rating, and traps sitting on Harvey's pathway are quite common in this style of map, it's really easy to build a map that's sort of too easy for its tier, so we're going to need to invest some serious effort to make this actually dangerous. So next, a word about the map itself. I've chosen a map named Vineland for this build. The name fits the map since we're going to be intertwining a lot of different pathways, and it has 4,500 capacity, which is the maximum. It's got 2 excellent tomb placements out of the 3 at least, which I've marked temporarily here with the Hellscape blocks, just so I can keep track of where they are. It also has the gem mat in a nice clear area of the sky, and it has some nice gnarly twisty bedrock with very interesting placement. In the background here, you'll see that I've gone ahead and built the absolute minimum Harvey pathway, which I am walking through now. I'm not really one to follow directions to the letter, but in the case of mazes, I am actually going to follow behavior's recommendations and build the Harvey pathway first. We want to keep it somewhat long, so we have plenty of opportunities for shortcuts, and plenty of space to trap things without just making a giant single kill box room, but we also don't want this pathway so overwhelmingly long that we can't trap it reasonably, or that it leads to the map being too long. I do have a very particular concept in mind for this braided maze that I think will lead to a complicated, fun maze map, so we're going to take advantage of that concept, but it does rely on the raider having the opportunity to leave and rejoin the main pathway regularly, so we need to build that main pathway first in order to come up with a good implementation. Alright, so we've got our Harvey pathway finished, and now we want to start on the maze braiding. I have a very particular concept in mind that I've never actually tried before, but I want to give it a try and see how the raiders like it because I think it's going to work pretty well. The general idea is to have pathways that either always provide a shortcut, or lead to a tomb, or both, so it's basically always advantageous to the raider to leave Harvey's pathway. Then we get to make sure that traps exist for those shortcuts, or at least most of those shortcuts, that could never exist on a valid Harvey pathway. I do like to make heavy use out of quarter angle blocks when building mazes. They're complicated, they give the raider a lot to pay attention to, and they provide a lot of interesting opportunities to cross pathways, create shortcuts, and add traps that can hit multiple pathways or strike abnormally far along a single pathway. Plus, it's easy to expand parts of it later to a full block when you want, whereas the opposite's not always true. Sometimes you can't shave down a block without creating a gap in the map, especially if you've built a particularly compact map, so we're just going to make sure that we have plenty of space here, and that we start out with the smallest possible blocks, and then we can expand those later should we need it. We also are going to pick the medieval pack for the basic path in Vineland because we can build a nice medieval village appearance pretty quickly and easily in the entryway, so that's probably a good starting point for the aesthetic of the map. When we're considering our Harvey pathway, we do also want to make good use of all this lovely bedrock, both to reduce our capacity costs and provide good opportunities for hollow cube shenanigans. We may end up adding a few more crossovers from each side path with the main path, but in general the side paths shouldn't intersect with each other, and generally each side path will start in the middle of the Harvey path, between the start and end of the previous side path, and it should end between the start and end of the next side path. We'll start a new side path at the end of each previous one, or roughly thereabouts, meaning that at any given time we should have a total of 1 to 3 pathways all heading towards the gen mat. What this means is that each time the raider takes a different set of side passages, they're going to have a different experience, and they're going to encounter the same traps from different angles than their last run through, and that can keep things fresh, entertaining, and hopefully deadly since the raider won't be able to easily memorize trap locations. We also have a number of opportunities for this along the main passageway, both in Harvey pathable types and in non-Harvey pathable routes. The most effective branching pathways of a braided maze do use Harvey pathable routes to encourage the raider to consider that as a Harvey pathway, so in order to keep Harvey along the main pathway, instead of just taking the shortcuts, we're going to need to use some subtle tricks to keep him going the way we want, like the time-honored floor hollow cube. Next up, we want to build out the walls and roofs to enclose the pathways. I went ahead and took care of this so you don't have to watch me indecisively place and remove the same block 14 times in a row while deciding if it actually goes there or not. This is the stage that usually takes me the longest, but it's usually where the map really starts to take shape. We want a good mix of rooms and narrow hallways, since both provide opportunities to trip up different kinds of raiders. We also want to set ourselves up for success with both a good Bloodlust Guard ambush, which is a staple of braided mazes, since it provides an excellent opportunity to ambush the raider from multiple different directions at once. And we also want to include some solid trap setups, right? So we're going to definitely want to take advantage of this map's verticality as well. And I think I've done that here. We've gone ahead and created a nice vertical climb, if I can work my way through here. This kind of vertical climb area will present some interesting opportunities, I think. This is actually a side passage up here, and then we've got a Harvey pathway leading up this direction. And then we have a nice spiral tower here. Our path does offer several spiral climbing areas. We've got a side pathway down there that leads to another one, which is a little bit shorter than this one, of course. And then we have a nice long spiral passageway. We've got a kind of glass arch up here, and then we end up at the gen mat. And we're going to stick a second wave hollow cube here to offer a quick exit, and we're going to make it clear to the raider that there's a tomb down there because I can't easily incorporate that into the level. So we've got this other pathway down here leading all the way down here, and yeah, in general we've got a bunch of branching spiral pathways. We've taken some advantage of the level's verticality, and we've got a bunch of different areas that we can make use of to add some interesting and creative traps. Now, at this point, building the rest of the exterior shouldn't take us too many more blocks, and I've gone ahead and applied some basic theming here as well. Just so the map doesn't look all that boring, we do want the thumbnail to look nice in order to convince raiders to visit the map. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and worked a bit on the exterior. I've also converted the central spiral tower into a red block theme, and I've converted the back tower into a sandstone block theme, and part of the bridge as well, just to give it that little bit extra bit of navigability. If a raider notices that they're in the area that's surrounded by these medieval deco blocks, they'll know they're in the first section, the red blocks are the second section, and the sandstone is the third section. So that should be enough to help them get a little bit of orientation as far as where they are in the maze. Now on to the fun part. I'm going to go ahead and start placing guards and traps around the map, which you can see me doing in the background here. Now this might require some minor geometry changes, but by and large we should already be pretty well set on that front. Due to the way danger rating works and our target of dangerous danger rating, we want to avoid traps overlapping Harvey's pathway and crossing fields of fire as much as possible, and it'd be nice if we could minimize our use of hollow cubes as well. Luckily, that coincides nicely with our goal of keeping the raider in danger at all times so they never get bored. In order to do that, we're going to need to spread our traps out anyway. However, we're still going to concentrate traps in a couple key areas. At any given point of the map, there's possibly 2 to 3 paths the raider could be on at any given point. However, that also means there's a lot of intersections, and that presents a really neat opportunity. A guard ambush is going to be extremely effective here. If we can hide a couple of guards with Bloodlust on the entry pathways, and then force the raider to encounter a guard on one of the later pathways, the guards with Bloodlust are going to rush in from behind while the raider is still engaged with the guards from their pathway and the parallel ones. Depending on whether the raider is on the Harvey path or a parallel one, their experience with the ambush and the routes the guards will take is going to change as well. Ideally, we want to get about 6 to 8 guards on the ambush, probably no more than that. We don't really have the space for that, and they're going to quickly get in each other's way and become counterproductive. That's going to contain a fair amount of our trap budget in terms of danger rating, so we're going to want to be careful to avoid overlap as much as possible from then on in our traps themselves. The last step to take here is decorating. I haven't really gone over how I decorate in depth yet, but in general you want to draw the raider's attention in as many incorrect directions in the short term as possible, while simultaneously directing them down the correct path or paths in the long term. Not to get too psychology focused here, but most raiders need to feel like they're making progress. If they don't feel like they're progressing towards the goal, they'll often abandon the raid. Therefore, you need to give them the tools to progress while still making them fight for every step they take. As Winston Churchill once said, nothing in life is so exhilarating as to be shot at without result, and this holds true Meet Your Maker as well, so make sure you're shooting at the raider quite a bit, but not necessarily so much that a skilled raider, or at least a raider who's been killed by that particular shot in the past, can't avoid it. Now, as you can see in the background here, I'm going ahead and decorating the map. However, you'll also note that I'm placing markers to point out the routes to the tombs And I'm putting Harvey markers down pointing out the direction to the GenMat at each intersection. Every time the path diverges and then reattaches to the main Harvey pathway, I want to put a Harvey marker indicating which direction the actual forwards direction of the map is. That way the raider knows when they're moving forwards, and that's critical to keeping them interested in a maze. Keep the raider feeling like they're making progress. You have to keep pushing them forward and making them think that they are actually going towards the GenMat, and they have to be actually doing that. They have to actually make progress towards the GenMat if you're going to keep their attention. We can also add attachments to make noise in certain areas to help block out the noise of guards, and potentially some trap activation noises, though generally you're not really going to conceal those too terribly well. It's important to note that holocubes do also have a very subtle noise, and careful raiders sometimes listen for this, so some sort of a noise-making attachment can also help mask that noise. Finally, one of the tombs was way out in the corner of the map, and it's so far away that I couldn't really work it into the map without a huge block investment and a huge trap investment in order to keep the pathway interesting. So since we're adding in a second wave holocube near the GenMat to let raiders out once they grab it, we're going to make sure that that exit points towards the last tomb and stick some indicators around to point out that tomb, so anyone interested can easily hop over and grab it on their way out. And after all that, we are good to go. We're just going to go ahead and activate our map, and we'll see how it does. On that note, we're going to go ahead and end this video. Thanks for watching, hope you have a great day, and I hope I'll see you next time.